Eren versus Lelouch, the Rumbling versus the Zero Requiem. Which plan is superior, and is one just a cheap imitation of the other? This entire debate started on April 7th, 2021. Following the conclusion of the Attack on Titan manga, an ending that to this day still sparks controversy within the fandom and the broader anime community. During that time, something unexpected happened. Lelouch was trending on Twitter. And why was this the case? Because many believed that Eren pulled off his own Zero Requiem. This idea became mainstream, as seen in many large anitubers who covered Attack on Titan during that time. And of course, these comparisons took a turn for the worse when people started to call Attack on Titan just a ripoff of Code Geass. This led to people comparing Eren to Lelouch, which then led to people insulting Eren's behavior while talking with Armin prior to his death. Many called Eren a crying beta and Lelouch a stoic Chad for how he accepted death with a more mature attitude. Lelouch got to kiss many women, and Eren never got to be with Mikasa. These comparisons unfortunately still continue to this day. I can't stand these comparisons because they lack context and nuance for both situations. Lelouch freaked out all the time in Code Geass, especially when he perceived Nully to be dead or in serious danger. He cried many times during the series, including this scene with C2. The reason why Lelouch was so stoic before the end is because throughout the Zero Requiem, he was with C2 and Suzaku, two individuals he could express his emotions to, which kept him calm and collected by the end. Eren distanced himself from his friends during the events leading up to and the Rumbling itself. Lelouch could have moments like this, where Eren couldn't. Also consider that Eren felt trapped in following this path and could only express his true feelings when it was over. It's disappointing that some of the discourse between these series ended up this way, since I don't think it's a productive way to compare these series. Anyways, I got sidetracked here. Let's get back to the bigger issue. Was the Rumbling a cheap imitation of the Zero Requiem? If you go by the mainstream opinion, then obviously it was. And there is definitely an argument for this, because Eren and Lelouch both tricked their half-brother to obtain the most powerful weapon. Lelouch acquired the flayas, and Eren acquired the power of the founding Titan. Following this, they both turned their brothers into their puppets. Zeke was under Eren's control, just like every other Titan, and Lelouch commanded Schneizel to serve Zero using his Geass. There's an epic declaration as they reveal their true intentions to the world, which came immediately after they used the ultimate power. Part of both plans involved taking control of the government. Eren replaced the leaders on Paradis Island with the Jeargerists, and Lelouch replaced Britannia with the UFN. They became the villains of the story, uniting the whole world against them, including their loved ones. Eren pushed away Mikasa, and Lelouch pushed away Colin, yet both women still want to learn why, and ultimately figured it out by the end. It was for their protection. Whether it was personal philosophy or through supernatural means, Eren and Lelouch both realized they had to die as the final part of their plan. One of Eren's reasons for enacting the Rumbling was to protect Historia, and Lelouch since day one wanted to make a gentler world for Nunnally. Mikasa, Eren's closest friend and lover, killed him to end the Rumbling, and Suzaku, Lelouch's closest friend, killed him to end the Zero Requiem. Before Eren and Lelouch die, Armin and Nunnally have this moment where they both learn the truth behind their actions. Eren's death led to the end of the Titans, and Lelouch's death led to the end of the Flayas, two forces that enslaved the world. Both put things into place before they died, so their actions wouldn't be in vain. The Eldians from the Scout Corps and the Black Knights both became heroes for fighting against Eren and Lelouch. Both of their plans ultimately led to the end of the major conflicts, thus the world could move towards peace. And for some bonus similarities, both were a victim of their father's schemes, although in Eren's case, it's a bit more complicated than that. Eren and Lelouch both lost their mothers at a young age, which set them on this path. Eren founded the Jeargerists, and Lelouch founded the Black Knights, but I would argue Lelouch's Britannian slaves are a better comparison to the Jeargerists since both groups were zealots. Spend more time thinking about it and I'm sure you'll find even more similarities. Yet despite this, calling the Rumbling a clone of the Zero Requiem would be inaccurate, as it only lessens the complexities of both. They only sound similar because I purposely framed it that way by ignoring the key differences when listing the similarities. Like Eren didn't initially plan on Mikasa killing him or that the Rumbling would wipe out all the Titans. That was only something he figured out later on. I based this on a video of someone who has a greater understanding of Eren's character than I do, and I would encourage you to watch that video to learn more about Eren's character. Anyways, Eren was going to wipe out all humanity outside of the island with the Rumbling, whereas Lelouch only threatened people with the Flayas. It is also important to note that their philosophy, goals, outcomes, and execution of said plans are vastly different. Ignoring this is the wrong way to go about comparing the two plans. You have to consider these elements plus other important details when determining which plan is superior, and that's what I'm going to do in this video. One quick disclaimer, there are two defenses for the Rumbling that I want to address. The first is that because Isayama based the world of Attack on Titan on determinism, meaning that these events were going to happen no matter what, Eren never had a choice in that matter to not go forward with the Rumbling. The second is that Eren saw the future through the Attack Titan, and just like with Doctor Strange, he chose the path that would lead to the best outcome. In this case, that's attempting to wipe out the entire population around the world with the Rumbling. This implies that it was the only option that would accomplish Eren's goals. Eren also tried to see if he could counteract the future and change it. Each time things went according to how he saw it, which made him realize that the future was fixed, and his failure to find a better solution helped him come to terms with this reality. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to ignore these arguments when comparing the plans. Otherwise, the discussion is pointless because Eren's Rumbling is canonically the best option. This means all the flaws in the plan are purposeful and have to occur to achieve the end result. You could argue that Eren might have seen better options but chose not to enact them for whatever reason. There's not enough information for me to determine that, so I'm just not going to include these arguments. So let's assume that there were better ways for Eren to accomplish his goals, and the same applies to Lelouch. With that in mind, let's proceed to finally settle this debate once and for all. Which plan was better, the Rumbling or the Zero Requiem? Oh, and real quick, if you want more videos comparing Lelouch to other prominent anime characters, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get back to the action. It is important to understand that Eren and Lelouch were working towards two similar but different goals. Lelouch wanted to free the world from Schneizel and Charles to give humanity a future. Eren was trying to ensure the protection of his friends and everyone else on Paradise Island from the rest of the world. Along the way, both wanted to end the cycle of hatred. To do these things, Lelouch created the UFN, became the Emperor of Britannia, abolished the aristocracy, destroyed the mausoleum of past emperors, and freed the numbers. He then forced the UFN to allow Britannia to join and then controlled the world using the newly acquired Flayas. Part of that involved using Geass on Schneizel to serve Zero. Lelouch then arranged it so Suzaku, while in the Zero costume, would kill him. This would occur while Lelouch traveled with the Black Knight members to the execution grounds, which was being televised in front of the world. Now, Eren initially followed Zeke's euthanasia plan, which led to the creation of the Jeargerists and the attack on Liberio. The Jeargerists used Zeke's spinal fluid to take over the government and later on would free Eren from his cell. Eren, in the most dramatic way possible, reunited with Zeke while Marley attacked the island. Eren then betrayed and tricked Zeke into setting everything into motion, allowing him to take control of the Founding Titan. Using the Founding Titan, he killed 80% of the world's population with the Rumbling. It was only 80% because his friends stopped the Rumbling, which led to Mikasa being the one to kill him. There's a significant distinction between these approaches, and that's the opposing attitudes and philosophies of both characters. Eren is a pessimist who believes that peace will never happen or last, and thus the Eldians will always be at war with Marley, so it's important to make sure they can defend themselves against future attacks, even if that means wiping out everyone who is or could be a threat to the Eldians. Eren doesn't trust others to get the job done and would rather see it through himself. We've seen Eren act this way before, like during the time Levi's squad tried to stop Ani. Lelouch is an optimist by comparison who believes that if given the chance, people would work towards creating a bright future. He believes it's the governments that lead people astray, so it's important to remove those systems if they prevent humanity from creating a bright future. And this brings up another interesting point. Eren believed in collective punishment, assuming everyone is part of the problem, whereas Lelouch saw the system that controlled the world as the problem. It's the reason why Lelouch, since forming the Black Knights, focused on destroying Britannia and not targeting civilians, and why Eren discusses many times that wiping out the other side is the only true path to freedom. So who's right? That's a difficult question because both are right and wrong at the same time. Technically, Eren isn't wrong in thinking that wiping out essentially everyone would end the cycle of hatred. It's like killing a fly with a rocket launcher. It definitely would get the job done, but it's overkill and would cause unnecessary destruction to implement. But you can argue that the hatred people share will never go away for good, so the only sure way to end it is to end them. I've seen this idea discussed by others in real life that I won't expand on further for obvious reasons. But the point is, as long as Marleyans hate the Eldians, the country will have leaders that reflect those ideas and continue this conflict until one side is wiped out. Eren did acknowledge that not everyone on the other side of the world was bad, he just didn't see any issues with crushing them alongside everyone else. Even George Carlin brilliantly once said,
"Politicians. Everybody complains about politicians. Everybody says they suck. Yeah! Well, where do people think these politicians come from? They come from American parents and American families, American homes, American schools, American churches, American businesses, and American universities, and they're elected by American citizens. If you have selfish, ignorant citizens, you're going to get selfish, ignorant leaders."
This idea goes against Lelouch's that replacing one system of rule for another wouldn't end the cycle of hatred. But keep in mind, the royal family ruled Britannia for so long that it no longer represented the people, since the people did not determine who ruled Britannia. It was done through succession. It was an aristocracy. Instead, Charles brainwashed all Britannians to believe his messed up ideas. In this case, the government was the source of the problem, and thus removing it would be the solution. Now, Lelouch also recognizes the issue that people wouldn't stop hating each other following his death, despite becoming the most hated person in the world. It is unrealistic to think that people who have hated the numbers up to this point would just stop doing that after one incident. So Lelouch went one step further and made Suzaku a hero that would rally the people. This means the plan was twofold: get everyone to hate him and then have everyone rally with Suzaku following his death. It is not unrealistic that people could put their issues aside and work together if someone was there to unite them, and that someone was Zero. It's why they chanted his name as Lelouch died. Now sure, there will still be racists living in Britannia in a post-Zero Requiem world, but the UFN won't propagate these ideas, the leaders of which are from the oppressed countries and have been fighting for freedom for a long time, so I can't imagine why they would become the things they hate. I'm not saying it's impossible, but rather it's highly unlikely. As long as this remains the case, then it doesn't matter what a minority of people think. If I add morality to this debate, Lelouch has an edge here for not collectively punishing everyone through genocide as Eren did, which is why Eren is also wrong in his beliefs. Lelouch's philosophy instead has more nuance to it, like the idea that people could learn to stop hating one another and work together. Or as I just said, focus on the root problem, which is the leadership not attacking people unrelated to the conflict. But it's not just about removing a tyrannical imperial government, but replacing it with something better. And that's what Lelouch did with the UFN. Now let's be fair for a moment here. Eren isn't Lelouch, obviously. Most of his life has consisted of violence and ignorance, unaware of the outside world, and fighting to wipe out the Titans from existence. He experienced so much death and betrayal that it caused him to have a cynical view of everything, even experiencing the outside world as a disappointment. So disappointing that he would rather just go back to assuming that everyone on Paradise Island was the last of humanity. Since everyone was so used to living this way before Grisha, wiping out everyone outside the island, the Titans, and erasing people's memories of it all became the best option. To say Eren was broken for a long time would be quite an understatement. Let's also consider the memories he's experienced from the attack Titan and the effect it had on him. None of this justified the rumbling, but it explains why Eren would even consider it to be the best option despite the morality of it. Lelouch, on the other end, grew up in a lap of luxury as one of Charles' children. It wasn't a perfect life, but certainly better than Eren's. Even after his exile, Lelouch didn't experience the same amount of death. Sure, he experienced the aftermath of Britannia's invasion of Japan firsthand, but it's not the same thing. Lelouch didn't get sick from killing someone until he was 17. By that age, Eren had seen enough death to last a lifetime. He also lived in Ashford Academy with Nunnally, which was relatively peaceful. Eren was in the Scouts, which was basically a death sentence where any mission could be their last. It is understandable, despite his terrible conditions, why Lelouch had a more optimistic view of the world. Lelouch is also a genius, a prodigy, and Eren isn't. That's not to say he's not smart, but obviously not to the same degree. Eren was approaching this through a simplistic understanding of things, whereas Lelouch viewed the world through a more nuanced perspective that was less black and white, and he focused more on that gray area. He wasn't just thinking about Nunnally anymore, and now it was about the rest of the world, where Eren was still operating in survival mode, aiming to protect only those he deemed important from the others. And you can argue Lelouch already had the opportunity to consider something like Eren's plan when dealing with Schneisels. Both Schneisel and Eren were going to use the most powerful weapon to kill billions if it ensured peace. But even if there's some truth to these philosophies, how would they work in practice? Let's go over the outcomes of the Zero Requiem and the Rumbling. After the Zero Requiem, the world started working together to solve the greater problems of today, like hunger and poverty. The UFN, alongside Nunnally and a Geass Schneisel, would lead the world in a state of peace. Britannia became the Principality, thus losing its power and many of its former areas, which became independent. They destroyed the Democles with the Flayas. Valletta and Ogi got married, showing the union between Britannia and Japan. Not everything though is perfect, because there are still war-torn countries and the incident with Zilkstan in Lelouch of the Resurrection. One thing that bothers me is that in Resurrection, Suzaku claimed that the terrorist attack ruined Lelouch's legacy because it ended the Year of Peace. But this isn't true, because the Zero Requiem was about giving people the freedom to make a better world, and as long as that's still the case, Lelouch's legacy will not be tarnished. Lelouch knew there would be future conflict. The idea was to leave behind a system that would work to solve these problems, which is what happened at the end of Resurrection. Anyways, everything seemed to work out as Lelouch planned it. What about the Rumbling? With 80% of the population gone, the rest of the world wasn't able to engage in future conflicts with Paradise Island. Eren's friends met with the leaders of the world to engage in peace talks, which I assume were successful since future conflicts aren't shown until after everyone Eren wanted to protect died. Now this is somewhat of a failure on Eren's part, since he only tried to wipe out everyone to prevent future conflicts like this. At the same time, Eren also figured these things would happen, which is why part of the plan was to give everyone enough time to strengthen their militaries. It is unclear if this came to fruition or not. If they weren't ready, that's not Eren's fault, since they would have plenty of time to catch up to the rest of the world. Eren's dead body would later transform the tree they buried him under into a similar tree that Ymir found. And of course, someone discovers it, which hints at a rebirth of the Titans, which is something Eren specifically removed as part of the rumbling. I don't fault Eren on this as well, because this is a supernatural phenomenon that is not fully understood, so there's no way to 100% guarantee that the Titans won't appear again. Eren's plan was a success since he removed the Titans from existence, ended the current conflict of hatred, and ensured the protection of everyone on the island, including his friends. So if both plans were a success, where do we go from here? While no one can deny the fact that both were successful, there are still flaws in the plans in both the execution and the lasting effects. This, in my opinion, is what separates the two, as it's the weakest part of Eren's plan, because putting aside the moral issue or the simplistic nature of Eren's beliefs, the actions themselves had some issues. Starting with the formation of the Jeargerist, this was counterproductive to Eren's plans. Remember, Eren wanted to protect his loved ones, so how does creating a radical faction that tried to kill his friends a productive idea? There are many parts where the Jeargerists nearly killed him, and it's not just the Jeargerists that put his friends in danger, it was turning all the high officials into Titans. Mikasa could have ended up like Louise during that fight. Taking it a step further, this group almost prevented his friends from stopping him, which is what Eren wanted but didn't want at the same time. And after Eren died, this group controlled the government. These people are zealots, Eldian restorationists, and would have no problem starting another conflict. How would having these people in charge protect anybody? This group isn't led by anyone with actual leadership skills, just people like Flock. Thankfully, Eren's friends were still around to help peace talks, but still, this group runs your island. The Jaegers only seem to exist just to make Eren's heel turn more extreme and add more conflict to the story. I get that the old government had some problems, specifically with wanting to feed Zeke to Historia, but if you're going to replace the government, at least do it with competent people. The crazy part is, most of the government supported people like Eren. It seemed like the situation with Historia was one of the first major conflicts between the two. They were on the same side, so his reaction just seemed extreme. I always assumed with Historia and the government, you wouldn't need to create the Jeargerists. Technically speaking, if you remove the Jeargerists, not much changes in the story, which kind of makes them pointless. Eren would just break out the cell on his own, meet up with Zeke during Marley's invasion, and start the rumbling. The only major difference is that the old government would still be in charge when it's all said and done, which I don't see as a problem. But now, let's talk about my next complaint, which is the meeting between Zeke and Eren, where Eren started the rumbling. The problem with this is twofold. One, the time they chose to meet was arbitrary since they could make contact at any time. And two, they didn't know what would happen if they did make contact. With issue number 1, if Eren just wanted to start the rumbling, then he could have made physical contact with Zeke then and there. Or Eren could have just broken out of jail earlier to meet up with Zeke. If Eren was going to do the heel turn anyways, why even remain in jail at all? I understand why Zeke would want to make physical contact, but that wouldn't apply to Eren. Oh, and a side note, putting Eren in jail in the first place didn't make any sense. They agreed to attack Liberio and cripple the enemy forces. If they wanted to rescue Eren, a simple rescue operation could work, or they could have chose not to evade Liberio at all. It came across as a contrived way to cause unnecessary conflict in the story, just like the Jaegerists themselves. They blamed Eren for what happened, but they were all operating under Zeke's plan, so the whole situation didn't make any sense to me. Anyways, back to the point. If meeting up together is super important, why make it seemingly arbitrary? With issue number 2, if they don't know what's going to happen, why wait until the last minute to figure it out? It worked out well, but it might not have. There wasn't much thought put into this, even though it seemed like Eren and Zeke were going to do some tests with the rumblings, but I guess that never happened. I feel like Isayama wrote it this way because it was the most exciting route, which I can't deny. I wish it made more sense. Beyond these issues, I have no problems with how Eren executed the rumbling. I thought it was brilliant how he worked with Zeke, which led to the attack on Liberio, and how he tricked him to gain the power of the founder. Even that twist was amazing. Now let's compare this to the Zero Requiem. Requiem. Lelouch needed the resources of Britannia to defeat Schneisel, so becoming the world's dictator wasn't counterproductive. The same applies to the formation of the Black Knights or Geassing his own forces. It's true that Lelouch did put those he cared about in danger, but Colin and Suzaku were the best pilots using the strongest nightmare frames in the series, so that it was pretty obvious they would be okay. In fact, Lelouch was so confident in this that he planned on Colin defeating Suzaku as a way to fake his death. But back to the safety of his loved ones, Nully is safe on the Democles and C2 is immortal. The rest of his friends are far away from the battlefield. None of the main members of the Black Knights died during the operation, but if some did, it probably would not have bothered Lelouch. Naomi, Toru, Asahina, and Senba died, and yet he didn't seem to care. And when you consider his plans weren't as specific as Eren's, this makes sense. He was trying to give the world a future, not protect a specific group of people in a specific location outside of his close friends and loved ones. Next, you have the timing of Lelouch's suicide. It had to happen at that time and in that way because the whole world needed to see it, and Suzaku as Zero had to be the one to kill him so Zero would become a hero. The impact wouldn't have been as significant had it occurred in a private location. The timing was also perfect because Lelouch at that point fully controlled the world as a dictator, so it made his death more significant, and by that point all the hatred was concentrated towards him. Plus, it gave time for people like Cornelia to gather resistant forces to fight back. Now, I'm not saying there were no problems with the Zero Requiem. You can argue the confusion of the Serve Zero command could lead to problems in the future, or the peace won't last if the leaders of the UFN die, or Suzaku for that matter. And the biggest, which is becoming an evil dictator, when Lelouch could have just moved the world itself into a bright future while working with the UFN. While it is technically true, it goes against Lelouch's character, and the fact that the Zero Requiem was supposed to serve as his redemption, meaning he had to die for it to work, as I said in the very beginning of this video. With the other stuff, those are definitely potential problems, but unlike the issues I have with the Rumbling, these aren't as problematic. These potential issues are much easier to resolve, and they aren't as counterproductive to Lelouch's vision. It is important to remember that there's no perfect plan to end conflict, because conflicts will never end. Rather, the key is to mitigate and resolve them as they occur. And that was something I considered when comparing Eren's plan to Lelouch's. So taking into consideration the philosophy of both characters, the outcomes, and the execution of their plans, I have to go with the Zero Requiem over the Rumbling. Not only was it better planned, but I agree with Lelouch's grander vision. It didn't involve genocide, nor driven by rage or selfishness, rather desire to move all of humanity into the future. And sure, Eren's plan has a higher % chance of working, but at what cost, and is that cost worth it? I would answer no.